Okay, let's talk next about the target weight debate. Our 55 versus 65% at breeding. So, is everybody familiar with our target weights in heifers? And for years we've preached, develop your heifers to 65% mature body weight at breeding. And who does that? Or tries to do that? Okay. Has anybody here tried the 55% approach? Okay, this is our fourth cow-calf days. I've only had one person say they've tried it. I'm going to be upfront and honest. I don't like the 55% approach, and I'll tell you why as we get through the presentation. I'm still old-fashioned. I like 65%. So why 65%? A lot of studies back in the 70s started looking at puberty and how nutrition influenced puberty. Reason being, if anybody has been in the beef industry long enough, in the 70s, they were saying we should have our first calves at 3 years of age. Anybody remember that? When it was so negative to have a yearling heifer get pregnant. We didn't want to start the breeding season, breeding them until they were 2. I was at a very interesting talk this summer from one of the classic investigators that did these studies, and he said it was one of the most challenging things to get producers to realize in the 60s was that we can get them bred at 2, or at these yearlings, and calve at 2. So they started this research and they started to look at puberty. And what they realized, that puberty, of course, is an interaction between age and weight. And that rate of gain post-weaning influences when puberty is going to occur. And then they, over a bunch of studies, realized that if you develop the heifers to about 65% mature body weight at the start of breeding, that sort of weight gain from weaning to breeding gets the majority of those heifers pubertal. And that meant better pregnancy success. Okay? So that's where the 65% came from. And in recent years, the 65% has been knocked a little bit because feed costs have gone up. And we want to try to minimize the feed delivery that we give to our animals. Now Eric's going to talk later, and he's going to show you that, yeah, we want to try to manage feed, but that's not the most important thing to manage. Productivity is. And so, although 55% might save us some feed, how does it affect productivity? Let's get this slide. Oops. Arguments for the 55%. So if we summarize the studies, and one of the deficiencies with this, and this is not a reflection of the people doing the studies, but there's very limited universities that have tried the 55%, so they've been repeated on the same animals. So, but one of the arguments for 55% is in the studies conducted, they did not see a difference in the percentage of heifers that were pregnant during the breeding season. So they developed them to 55 or 65% mature body weight. They let them have a 60 to 75 day breeding season, which is too long, and there wasn't a difference. But what did I preach earlier? It's not if, but it's when, right? Oops. They did not see puberty impacting pregnancy rate over the breeding season, but it's not if, it's when. They had less inputs, yeah, it was about $50 cheaper per heifer. Similar calving performance, but and similar longevity. So these are the arguments for 55%. But if we really start breaking this down, I'm going to present arguments against. The data would suggest breeding season is the same, but if we look at data conception, it's always later in the 55%. Okay? So we're getting less heifers pregnant early. That's an issue. Several of the studies noted that 55% caused the heifers, the first calf heifers, to have fewer breed back. Not all the studies showed this, but some of them did. So that impacts our longevity, right? Also, this is maybe my biggest argument is, they still recommend that they grow to 85% mature body weight at calving. So they got to grow sometime. So are you robbing Peter to pay Paul? Okay? So I'm either going to feed a heifer, a virgin heifer that's not lactating, not gestating, or I'm going to have to feed a gestating heifer that has more nutritional requirements. I'll take the younger. Second, I get concerned about wrecks because I've seen them. If I'm targeting 55% and I get this, that's kind of a familiar sight this year, and I hit 48% because they went off feed for 2 weeks, I'm going to have a wreck, guaranteed. How many people own a scale? Yeah, good, more than I was expecting. It takes more management for 55% because it's easy to underfeed. Also, one other thing is, we don't have to feed them that hard to get them to their target of 65% anyway. If I'm weaning a heifer 550 pounds, my target weight's 850 pounds, that's 300 pounds in 200 days. It's a pound and a third a day. That's not that hard to do. So, it's not like we're having to throw so much feed in these girls to get them to 65%. Lastly, if we're selecting for feed efficiency, we already know there's a potential negative impact there, and now I'm trying to stress them even more, we're going to have issues. So with that, thanks for listening. A few more funnies before we go, and I'd be happy to take any questions. Yes, sir.
What are the calving difficulties of those 55%ers compared to the 60?